Every place has its trademark. In England, for example, people have learned to do everything in the rain, because there the only certainty is that the sky will be gray and that it will rain, sooner or later. In other corners of the planet, however, it's the cold that rules. Life revolves around sub-zero temperatures, houses, clothes, schedules, habits. Everything is shaped by the freezing cold. But today we're going to talk about a place where it's not rain or cold that dictates the rules. It's the wind. Have you ever heard of the Falkland Islands? Don't confuse them with the Maldives, okay? Despite the similar name, they couldn't be more different. In the Maldives, the scenery is like something out of a travel magazine. Turquoise blue sea, bungalows over the water, shade, and cool water. In the Falklands, the scenery is different. Here, what dominates are cliffs, pastures, lonely sheep, and a bitter cold. But the one who really has the final say is the wind. It is the wind that decides whether the plane will land, whether the ship will arrive, whether there will be bread at the bakery or fresh fish for dinner. When it decides to blow hard, and it often does, the whole island comes to a standstill. And that's why today Bello Mundo is taking you there. Number 1. Location and general information. The Falkland Islands are down there on the map, lost in the middle of the South Atlantic, more than 600 kilometers off the coast of Argentina. Officially, they are considered a British overseas territory, but that classification alone is enough to cause controversy, because Argentina does not accept it at all. We will explain this dispute in more detail later. For now, what you need to know is that the archipelago has more than 700 islands, but in practice only 2 are actually inhabited and relevant: East Falkland and West Falkland. The climate? That damp cold that gets into your bones. Even in summer, the temperature rarely exceeds 10 degrees Celsius. And in winter, the problem isn't even the extreme cold. It's the wind. There are no mountains, no forests, no natural obstacles to block the icy air coming in from the sea. And as we said at the beginning, the wind rules. The landscape consists of open fields, low hills, cliffs, and icy sea. It seems like an inhospitable place, but surprisingly, it is a true natural sanctuary. The Falklands are home to one of the largest penguin populations outside Antarctica. There are 5 different species, including the elegant king penguin, the one that looks like it's wearing a suit. They walk along the beaches in groups, as if they own the place. And the truth is, they do. In addition to penguins, there are thousands of seabirds, albatross colonies, flocks of Magellanic geese, and other rare species that use the islands as a breeding or resting ground. It is a paradise for biologists, photographers, and wildlife lovers, but you need to be willing and have a warm coat to get there. Number 2. History. The Falkland Islands did not get their name by chance. It was the French who christened the archipelago in the 18th century. They called it Île Malouine, in honor of the sailors from the city of Saint-Malo. But the British also had their eye on it, and it wasn't long before they arrived, planted their flag, and began to colonize. That's when the trouble started. But there's one more detail. The Falklands are much closer to Argentina than to the United Kingdom. They are only 370 miles from the South American coast, less than many people drive in a weekend. That is why, from the beginning, Argentina has always claimed that the islands should be part of its territory. During the 19th century, control of the islands changed hands several times. There was a Spanish presence, then an Argentine one, then a British one. But in 1833, the British took definitive control, and since then, they have administered the archipelago as an overseas territory. However, Argentina never accepted this history. This tension remained latent for over a century, until it exploded in 1982. That was when Argentina, ruled at the time by a military dictatorship, decided to invade the islands to claim what was theirs. The British response was swift and harsh. They sent ships, planes, and troops. The conflict lasted just over 2 months, but left nearly 1,000 dead, most of them on the Argentine side. The Falklands War was short, but its consequences were profound. For Argentina, it was a bitter defeat. In addition to losing the war, the country's international standing was damaged, and the dictatorship began to collapse shortly thereafter. For the United Kingdom, it was a victory, but the cost was high, both in human lives and in criticism of how it was conducted. After the conflict, the British reinforced their military presence, built the Mount Pleasant Air Base, paved roads, improved the port, and encouraged tourism and fishing. To this day, residents celebrate Liberation Day on June 14th, and on January 10th, some still celebrate Margaret Thatcher Day, the Prime Minister who ordered the counterattack. The United Kingdom continues to administer the islands to this day, but Argentina has never let the issue go. On every Argentine map, the Malvinas appear as part of the country, and this dispute remains alive in schools, in political speeches, in embassies, and on social media. And in the middle of it all are the islanders, who, incidentally, have made it very clear what they want. In a recent referendum, more than 99% voted to remain a British territory. In other words, they do not seem willing to change flags. Number 3. Population, religion, and languages. Living in the Falkland Islands is a huge exercise in patience, resilience, and detachment. To begin with, the entire population of the archipelago is around 3,600 people, and almost everyone lives in East Falkland, more specifically in the capital, Stanley, which, to tell the truth, looks much more like a village than a city. Outside of that, there are small rural settlements, a few family farms, and little houses scattered across the countryside. There are no shopping malls, no McDonald's, no highways connecting the islands. And don't expect nightclubs, discos, or big nighttime events either. But there are pubs with fireplaces, bingo at the church, hot tea with cake, and most importantly, everyone knows each other. Social life revolves around the community itself. In fact, one of the most eagerly awaited traditions of the year is the costume sheep race. Yes, you heard right. The sheep get dressed up in clothes and everything, and no one there finds it strange. On the contrary, it's a cause for celebration. Almost everyone speaks English, with an accent that is a mix of British, rural, and some local slang that you won't understand at first. The currency is the pound, the TV picks up the same channels as the UK, and the schools follow the British curriculum. But living in the Falklands is nothing like living in London. It's much more like living on a remote base in Iceland or in the Alaskan wilderness. There are only 2 commercial flights a week, and even then, it all depends on the wind. If the weather changes, the airport closes. And then, goodbye to your travel plans. Some people have been stuck there for over a week, waiting for the weather to clear. That's why everyone there learns to live at a leisurely pace. Everything has to be planned in advance: trips, doctor's appointments, food deliveries. And speaking of food, that's another item that can't be missing on any trip. Number 4. Gastronomy and eating habits. In the Falklands, lamb is the star of the table. The islands have many more sheep than people, and that's not just a figure of speech, it's a fact. The so-called Falklands lamb is a local pride and joy, and is present at lunch, dinner, barbecues, and even in soup. In rural homes, food is cooked on wood-burning stoves using peat or brushwood as fuel. Many people grow small vegetable gardens and greenhouses to get fresh vegetables. With luck, you can harvest potatoes, carrots, cauliflower, all planted during the short window of milder weather. But as supplies depend on a monthly boat that brings products from Chile or the United Kingdom, residents also have a habit of preserving everything. Jams, salted meats, preserves, and canned goods are part of the basic pantry. The traditional breakfast usually includes fresh bread, free-range eggs, and homemade jams. And if there's one tradition that no one gives up, it's the smoko. It's like a break to have tea or coffee accompanied by cakes, pies, or homemade bread rolls. This custom originated on farms as a break between tasks, but today it has spread to offices, schools, and even government offices. In Stanley's cafes, the menu is basic: fish and chips, which is nothing more than fish with French fries, meat pie, and an English beer. Now that you've seen the landscapes, history, and daily life of the Falklands, you may be wondering, why is this beautiful place considered one of the most depressing in the world? Well, that's where the other side of the story begins. Number 5. Isolation. The Falklands may have stunning landscapes, wildlife, and a peaceful routine, but living there is far from a dream. In reality, it is one of the most isolated, expensive, and logistically complicated places on the planet. The islands are almost a 13-hour flight from the United Kingdom and about 2 hours from South America, but that doesn't mean it's easy. Currently, there are only 2 commercial flights per week, one to Chile and one to Brazil. And if the wind blows hard, as we've seen happens often, the plane simply doesn't land. To visit some farms on the smaller islands, the only way is to wait for the government air service, which uses small twin-engine planes to deliver mail, supplies, and people. But again, if the weather doesn't cooperate, no one leaves, no one arrives. For a long time, a supply boat made the route once a month, and families organized their lives around the arrival of that ship. Today, despite some improvements, the routine remains unpredictable. And if life is difficult in the capital, imagine what it's like for those who live outside it. These are isolated rural areas with no roads, no stable internet, and access only by boat or small plane. Families raise sheep, plant what they can, and live in a virtually self-sufficient manner. Children in these regions either study remotely or are sent to boarding schools in Stanley from a certain age. This physical isolation even affects the way people think. There is what scholars call island syndrome, a feeling of resistance to change, and a certain distrust of everything that comes from outside. As the community is small and closed, new ideas or services are often viewed with caution. Number 6. Prices. Food, medicine, clothing, building materials, electronics. Everything comes by ship or plane. The result? Everything costs a fortune. A simple packet of rice, a basic coat, or even washing powder can cost 3 times more than in London. Now imagine buying a new cell phone, a TV, or even a drill to fix something at home. It's a hole in your pocket. And don't count on sales or express delivery. There are no malls, no big department stores, no marketplaces with next-day delivery. And that goes for much more than food and clothing. Even the internet is a luxury item. In a world dominated by social media, video calls, and streaming, staying connected has become part of modern life. But in the Falklands, connection is a privilege and often a source of frustration. Until 2025, the island had only one operator responsible for telephony and broadband. The cheapest, unlimited plans offered speeds of 5 megabits per second for £50 per month. In short, this means you can only open email, send messages, and watch low-quality videos with constant crashes. For comparison, in the UK it is possible to get internet speeds of 100 to 300 megabits per second for £30 to £40. That is, more speed for less money. But believe it or not, before these plans, the situation was even more surreal. The system worked on a data allowance basis. Anyone who exceeded the limit had to pay £45 for just 3 extra gigabytes, enough to watch a single movie in HD. An absurd expense, even by London standards. This limitation meant that many families had to control every megabyte. Watching an entire series could mean spending half your salary. Many people kept up the habit of going to public Wi-Fi hotspots, buying a prepaid card, and settling for an unstable connection. Streaming was, and often still is, nearly impossible. In 2025, some residents who could afford it began using the Starlink satellite service, but the government declared the system illegal to protect the state monopoly. The result is an almost dystopian scenario: no mobile internet, expensive and slow Wi-Fi, and limited opportunities for those who want to study remotely, sell products online, or just connect with the world. For those who already live in geographical isolation, this digital barrier only intensifies the feeling of being far away from everything and everyone. Number 7. Poor health and shaken mental health. As if the constant cold, prices, and extreme isolation weren't enough, there's another delicate detail. Healthcare in the Falklands is limited. Starting with the basics. The healthcare system is simple and small, compatible with the reduced population. There is only one general hospital that serves everyone: residents, visitors, tourists, anyone who needs it. But what if the problem is more serious? Then it gets complicated. There is no resident ophthalmologist, for example, and for any specialized treatment, the patient needs to be transferred to Chile or Uruguay. And yes, that means getting in line for air evacuation, dealing with the wind, the weather, and the costs. Now, when it comes to mental health, the situation is even more fragile. According to a study called 52 Degrees South, Mental Health Services in the Falkland Islands. The islands have only 2 psychiatric nurses and a single psychiatrist who visits the island twice a year. That's right, twice a year. There are no psychiatric beds. If someone needs to be hospitalized for psychological reasons, they are placed in the general ward of the hospital, and in more serious cases, they need to be taken to another country. In other words, in addition to the suffering, there is the logistical and emotional burden of leaving the island, being away from family, spending a lot of money, and all this in an environment where mental health is still surrounded by taboo. In fact, this is another huge problem. Prejudice. As the community is very small and everyone knows each other, many people avoid seeking help for fear of being labeled. Being called depressed there can close doors at work, generate gossip, and further alienate those who are already suffering. Not surprisingly, the most common conditions detected among residents are anxiety, depression, and alcohol abuse. Recent research indicates that 1 in 8 people may suffer from depression or anxiety, and 1 in 10 shows signs of post-traumatic stress disorder. Alcohol consumption and the use of certain substances also appear to be outlets, especially among young people and more isolated residents. In an attempt to change this reality, in 2024, the government launched an anti-stigma campaign, bringing together 273 participants, 94% of whom were from the capital Stanley, and 72% of whom were women. The campaign had a positive impact, but it revealed something worrying. Many people in the interior of the island still do not have access to basic mental health services. There is a psychological support hotline, but most of those who call live in the capital. In the interior, on farms and in settlements, people continue to deal with everything on their own. And in a land where the climate is hostile, the sky is always gray, and leaving the island is expensive and difficult, this has a huge impact. The result of this combination, isolation, wind, high cost of living, lack of internet, few leisure options, is an environment where emotional illness is more common than it seems. It is precisely for these reasons that the Falklands always appear on the list of the most depressed places in the world. But what about you? Would you have the courage to live in a place like this? Comment below and tell us what you think of this place. Enjoy the video, subscribe to Bello Mundo, activate the bell, and share with those who also love curiosities. Thank you very much for your company, and see you next time.